Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, where it's an absolutely beautiful day. I'm sitting at Aoyama Park next to Tokyo National Art Center, and it's really nice out here today. Autumn season is probably the best time of the year in Japan. It's a great time to come and visit the country if you're thinking of traveling somewhere interesting. Last week we were in Kyoto for several days. We haven't been to Kyoto in too many years. It's a very beautiful place. We went there to enjoy the food, and we won a free stay at a really nice hotel. And we enjoyed the hotel and also walking around the city and enjoying the wonderful cityscapes, as well as the old temples and such on the side of the city, Kiyomizu, and places like that. I was surprised at how busy it was in Kyoto. It's probably the busiest I've ever seen it. Japan recently reopened to allow foreign tourists to enter the country, and it seems like lots of people have come and they have all gone to Kyoto. So it's good to see all the people coming to Japan, and especially Kyoto, to enjoy all of the wonderful things you can see and do there. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the subject of today's video, and this is going to be a camera which a lot of you are familiar with, especially you Pentax fans. This is the Pentax Spotmatic, or SP, which was released around 1964 or so. This camera was a real milestone in photographic technology, a real hit when it was introduced that year. This was one of the most cutting-edge cameras available on the market, and of course the most advanced camera which Pentax had ever produced up to that time. This camera is based on the earlier Asahi Pentax camera, like the one that I reviewed last week, but much more technologically advanced. It featured a built-in through-the-lens light meter system, which was unique at the time, and it turned out to be, I guess, fundamental in photography, in, I guess, SLR photography from this point on. Earlier cameras with light meters often required the light meter to be clipped to the front of the camera, either independently or attached to the shutter speed dial, while other ones might have internal coupling of the light meter, but they had an external light meter eye and an external light meter reading. The Pentax AAP was able to put all of this stuff inside the camera and under the prism, which made it a much cleaner design, a much more attractive looking camera, and made it much easier to use and more accurate, much more accurate light metering. So a really win-win-win design situation for the Pentax Spotmatic. Let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions and how to use the Spotmatic. We'll go ahead and start at the top here, and we have this very typical Pentax rewind knob. The good thing about Pentax is that despite the variation of the models which they made over the decades, they always tried to maintain the same basic outline of the camera. When they brought out the original AAP in the late 1950s, they were really happy with the design. It was quite popular to the market, and so they just kind of kept pushing that design or continuing it over the years. And things that telltale things like the rewind knob and the counter cover and stuff like that, Pentax changed these as little as possible. It's also more economical to kind of use the same parts year after year without making new ones, but a very similar design. We have R to denote that it's the rewind knob for people who might not understand that immediately. We have an arrow saying which way to turn it. There's a nice pop-out lever with a roller tip, which makes it easier to rewind the film. Under that, we have this indicator dial, which has 3 settings on it. It's set right now to the empty setting, and this is, of course, if you have no film in the camera, it's a good idea to set to the empty setting. That way you know it's empty. You don't accidentally open the cover when you have film in the camera and expose it. We have a couple of other settings. We have a color setting here with 2 indicators, and one could be for slide film and the other for negative film. And then we have panchro, which was the old expression for black and white or monochrome film. Here we have a very nice designed pentaprism without anything on it. Pentax made an accessory flash shoe which clipped on to the dovetails here on the viewfinder eyepiece. As I mentioned with the Pentax AP, they were available in 2 colors, silver and black. The black being hard to find, the silver being easy to find. This would use the same parts or the same one which would fit on earlier models like the SL or the SV or even the old Asahi Pentax. Good thing about these early Pentax is there was some interchangeability among some of the parts. Over on the right side here, we have the film speed selector dial, and we have a full range of speeds on this camera, and I love how it works. It's a very smooth, well-machined, well-designed dial. We have a full range of speeds from bulb in 1 second up to 1/1000th of a second, and you can program the film speed by lifting up and turning. This is kind of a standard thing which came out in around 1960 or so, when the cameras first came with built-in light meters, like the old, I think SR7 Minolta, and something which you find now on some of the more modern high-end cameras. The new Fuji X series uses the same system because it's very simple and fundamental and easy to use. You simply pull up on the dial and you turn it until the number in the dial matches the speed of the film you have loaded in the camera. Right here we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release, and here we have this really wonderful, cool design winding lever, and we have the film speed counter dial here on the top, and this resets automatically when you open the film door. Pretty cool feature. On the back of the camera we have the viewfinder eyepiece. This is a plastic non-marring eyepiece, so you don't have to worry about scratching your eyeglasses if you wear eyeglasses. It has dovetails on the side, and as I mentioned earlier, you can clip on the accessory flash adapter here, or you can attach a rubber eye cup, or you can also attach diopter adjustment lenses to correct for your eyesight if you don't want to wear glasses while you are shooting. On the bottom of the camera we have the battery chamber cover. One thing to look for in these cameras is often the batteries in these cameras have leaked and they've become really corroded, and these caps don't come off. If you're shopping for one of these cameras, always look on the bottom to make sure there's no corrosion around it, because first, it can be almost impossible or completely impossible to remove the battery cap. Another thing is, if it's corroded enough to damage the battery cap or to seize it, the inside of the camera might be corroded enough that the light meter doesn't work or there are other issues. So this is one of the first things to check when you are looking for one of these cameras. This camera uses an LR41 or SR41 battery. It was originally designed to use a mercury battery, but you can use a more modern silver oxide or alkaline battery. The meter will work fine with it. Here we have a standard 1/4" tripod socket, and over here we have the release button. You depress this button to rewind the film. Very simple, pretty much the same as most cameras of this era. On the front we have the flash sync sockets here. If you're going to be using a flash adapter on this camera, or say a flash handle, simply plug in your flash to either of these two. We have a couple of for X-Sync or for focal plane, whichever setting you like. If you're using a more modern flash, you can just follow the directions on your flash to set the flash to the camera, or vice versa. Here we have the light meter switch, and when you push the light meter switch up, this turns the light meter on, and if you look through here, I don't know if you can see, it turns orange when the light meter is turned on, and when you push it down it becomes clear. This isn't a really wonderful indicator to tell you that you've left the light meter on, but it does work, and make sure that you switch it off when you are not using the light meter so you don't run down the battery. On the other side here we have a self-timer. This is a wonderful feature for the old-fashioned way of taking a selfie. Just set the camera on something or put it on a tripod, set the self-timer, rewind the shutter, push the button, and you can see the self-timer move, and when it gets near to where it's facing straight up, you know it's ready to take a photograph. No lights or warning beeps or anything like that are required. On the lens itself, this camera uses the M42 mount, which was used by a variety of makers in Japan and Europe, so a huge variety of lenses are available for this camera. You can use the Pentax lenses, Yashica lenses, European lenses. There were so many lens options available for this camera. In this particular one, this is the standard lens, the 55mm f1.8, and this is what you'll usually see on these cameras. Sometimes you'll see the f1.4 lens, which is kind of a cult lens nowadays. It's gotten very popular and somewhat more expensive than it used to be. It's largely because it's really unique rendering. The f1.4 lens used thorium coating on the internal lenses to reduce chromatic aberration and to make the colors sharper when shooting at wide apertures, or say more accurately focused. This turns gold over time, and this gold tone inside the lens adds a lot of contrast to black and white film, and it makes, when you're shooting color film, it makes the colors warmer. Some people prefer, this effect that the lens has on the photographs. It's one of the reasons why it's a desirable lens, and some people don't. You can simply remove the yellow coating by putting the lens in the sunlight, so the sunlight shines against it, and that will clear out the yellowing, and in time it will eventually become clear again. For myself, I really like the yellowish coloring. I like the effects it has on the photographs when I take them. On this camera here we have aperture ring, and we have a setting here, auto and what we say manual setting, and this is kind of essential when you are using this camera. This camera has a coupled light meter, and what that means is when you adjust the settings here on the aperture or the shutter speed, it moves the light meter needle inside the viewfinder. But in order for this to work, you need to set to the manual setting, and this will limit the amount of light going through the viewfinder and to the light meter depending on where you have the aperture set. I don't know if you can see it moving as I open and close it. And you turn the light meter on, and then you choose the aperture you want, and then you would choose the shutter speed you want, and you choose a combination of aperture and shutter speed which lines up the meter needle right in the center, and then you are ready to shoot. And then you can switch the lens back to the open position, and it will stop down automatically when you take a photograph. Of course, you can focus when you have it in the manual setting, but if you're shooting at a small aperture, it's going to make the viewfinder darker, and also it's going to increase the depth of field to the point where it's really hard to focus very accurately. So the best thing to do is to set your shutter speed and aperture, and then open the lens and focus. That way you can focus more carefully and more precisely. The aperture ring here, quite easy to use. We have a depth of field scale on the Takumar lens, which shows how much depth of field you have at any given aperture. You would line up with the diamond here in the center for your focusing distance, and there's a little R mark next to that, and that's if you're using infrared film, because infrared film focuses on a slightly different plane than normal film. Here we have a window on the lens which shows your focusing distance, and we have an arrangement for both meters and feet. So a very simple system. These are really cool cameras. They have the things I already mentioned, that you have to keep an eye open on the light meter, not light meter, but the battery cap on the bottom to make sure that it's not corroded, because that's one of the most common issues with these cameras. The second most common issue with them is the shutter curtains, which can dry out over time, and they dry out and become stiff, and it makes the camera difficult to use. The shutter will run too slowly, or it may not run at all. This one is a little bit stiff, but not so bad. You can kind of see a slight wrinkling on the side where it's kind of shrunk a little bit, but it still seems to be working all right. The shutter curtain on this side seems to be fine, but when they get stiff, they don't roll so well, they don't flatten out so well, and that can cause a couple of issues. First, it can cause the shutter not to stick shut all the way, and it also can cause the mirror to stick up. Sometimes you can fix this by increasing the tension on the curtain rollers, and that pulls them across a little bit more firmly and allows the camera to operate more or less accurately, probably less accurately, but it will at least work. The best thing to do is, of course, replace the shutter curtains, but that's kind of a difficult job on these cameras. As I look for these cameras in Japan, I often find these where they've had the shutter curtains replaced within the last 5 or 10 years. And if you can find one where that work has been done, that should make the camera worth, you should be willing to to pay a premium for one of those cameras. Otherwise, they are incredibly reliable, very simple, very easy to use, and a very attractive camera, I think. But anyway, I'm about 15 minutes into this video, so I'm going to go ahead and stop now. I've got a big spider which is crawling right across the front here, kind of big. Oh, well, he jumped on me, then he jumped back off. But anyway, That's it for my video today. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, I'm getting a bunch of cameras over the next few weeks. I plan to be doing videos about these cameras. If you'd like to see these videos, please subscribe. And as always, I'm trying to get more people interested in vintage cameras and photography. And if you click the like button, that helps. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.